All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Lithuanian Research Back to the Old Country. My name is Kathleen McKenzie, Education and Programming Manager here at American Ancestors, and I will be moderating today's session. This program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. American Ancestors is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history, and we're pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. Our presenter today is genealogist James Heffernan. James has been with American Ancestors since 2015. He is a graduate of Boston College, where he worked in the conservation department at the John J. Burns Library. His previous work experience also includes an internship at Plymouth Patuxent in Plymouth, Massachusetts. James is a frequent contributor to American Ancestors magazine, the New England Historical and Genealogical Register, and the Vita Brevis blog. In his spare time, James scours eBay looking for family heirlooms. His areas of genealogical expertise include Central and Eastern Europe, with a particular focus on the former Polish territories of the Austrian, Russian, and German empires. Other specialties include Eastern Canada, colonial New England, and American immigration from 1890 to 1920. In this lecture today, James will detail the types of records that can be found in Lithuanian archives, how to access them, and tips for deciphering the languages that you'll likely encounter, including Lithuanian, Russian, and Polish. The webinar will also include information for finding a researcher based in Lithuania to access record sets that have not yet been digitized. At any point during today's presentation, do feel free to type any questions into the Q&A panel found at the bottom of your screen. We'll address the questions at the end of today's session. There is a syllabus for this session as well that can be purchased from our online bookstore. I've popped that into the chat. And you'll also find a link to that in your reminder emails, as well as in your follow-up email after today's broadcast. We are also recording this event, and starting tomorrow, you can freely go back and review any of the content from the presentation on our website and our YouTube channel. So if you missed something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always go back and review the presentation later. All right, so without further ado, I will go ahead and turn things over to James.
Thanks, Kathleen. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to be speaking to you today about Lithuanian genealogy and how to transition your research in American sources to finding your ancestors in Lithuania. It's by no means easy. My expertise is in Eastern European genealogy, and the frequent boundary and linguistic changes throughout Lithuania's history complicates our research as genealogists. My hope is that this webinar will demystify several aspects of Lithuanian research and set you up with the tools you need to either do the research on your own or to find help. This first section will be a primer on Lithuania's history, especially how historical events can affect genealogical research. This will by no means be exhaustive, but an attempt to condense Lithuania's history over the last 150 years or so. I encourage everyone to seek out histories and other secondary sources to fill in the gaps. A basic knowledge of the historical events that surrounded our ancestors' lives might explain why they chose to immigrate or why their records are written in a language other than Lithuanian. Their story is not complete without understanding the times and places that they inhabited. Here's a recent map of Central and Eastern Europe. Lithuania borders Poland, Belarus, Latvia, and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea. Lithuania and Latvia share ethnic and linguistic roots dating back to the Indo-European Baltic tribes that settled in the area during the Iron Age. However, for our purposes, it's important to look to Lithuania's east and west, the nations of Poland and Russia, which exerted tremendous influence on the Lithuanian territory from the Middle Ages through to the end of World War I. For much of that period, Lithuania belonged to a joint monarchy, part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, at one time the largest and most populous nation-state in Europe. If we step back about 350 years, we'll find a very different map of Central and Eastern Europe. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was formed in the mid-16th century when the Grand Duke of Lithuania, Władysław Jagiełło, married Jadwiga, the Queen of the Kingdom of Poland. Their dynastic union produced a kingdom that stretched from the Baltic Sea down through areas of modern-day Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine. The kingdom was cosmopolitan, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and towards the end of its existence, very poorly run. Poland exerted the dominant culture in the partnership. In the Commonwealth period, which ran until the late 18th century, the Lithuanian territories underwent a period of Polonization. Polish became the language of the nobility, and with Latin, the language of official record-keeping. The capital of the Commonwealth was initially in Krakow, in the far southern reach of the kingdom. It was later moved up to Warsaw to be more central. Property in the Commonwealth was reserved largely for the noble class, who owned large estates where peasant labor drove agricultural wealth. The nobility belonged to the legislative arm of the Commonwealth, known as the Sejm, which held considerable control over what laws the king could enact. The legislature initially functioned under a majority voting principle, but later adopted a privilege called liberum veto, which required unanimous consent among the nobility for any legislation to pass. It paralyzed the Polish-Lithuanian state and made it susceptible to influence from outside nations like Prussia, Austria, and Russia, who had been gaining in military strength in the intervening years. In a series of agreements between those three growing empires at the end of the 18th century, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was broken up, with Prussia, Austria, and Russia gaining large swaths of territory. The territories absorbed by the Russian Empire included the majority of the old Grand Duchy of Lithuania. The Lithuanian territories saw another cultural shift away from Poland and towards Russia. Compulsory military service was established, ranging from 25 years at the start of the 19th century to 6 years by the close of it. Movement was restricted throughout the empire, especially for Jewish families who were not allowed to leave their home province without permission. The empire was divided into gubernias, or governorates, which you can think of as similar to our concept of a state. The Lithuanian territories were split between the Kovno, Vilna, and Suwałk gubernias. Each gubernia was then divided into administrative districts, which were comprised of neighboring towns and villages. These administrative layers are very important in Lithuanian genealogy. In the same way that nearly every state in this country has a town named Springfield, you'll find the same town and village names across districts and gubernias in the Russian Empire. Our hope is that when it comes time to research in Lithuanian sources, we've already been armed with all the information we need to be positive we're searching in the correct area. In the 1850s, we see the introduction of Russian, written using the Cyrillic alphabet, into official documents including church and vital records. Prior to that, church records were most often recorded in Latin or Polish. Keep in mind that these official languages existed simultaneous to the Lithuanian or Yiddish that was often spoken at home. In 1861, the Tsar abolished serfdom throughout the empire. While the net effect was that peasant laborers were no longer tied to particular estates and now legally free to purchase land, the majority of property remained consolidated in local landlords who leased their land out to peasant farmers. As the century went on, and after several failed uprisings, the Russian Empire tightened its grip on its Lithuanian territories, banning the Lithuanian language outright and substituting Russian as the de facto language in the public sphere. The empire was also slow to industrialize. What industrialization they did promote favored areas further west of Lithuania, areas squarely within Poland today. This left the Lithuanian territory reliant on the success of each year's agricultural yield to sustain local economies. Not really a recipe for success. And it bred unrest as Lithuanian nationalism ebbed and flowed. But within that movement, there were still questions of whether the goal was to return to a Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth or a much scaled back, independent, and predominantly ethnically Lithuanian state. At the conclusion of World War I, Lithuania was reconstituted, albeit on a much smaller scale than the traditional lands of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Lithuanian became the official language of record keeping and education. Place names that had been officially known by Polish and Russian alternatives were now written in Lithuanian. The new Lithuanian state faced incursions from east and west as the Soviet Union attempted to seize territory, and the newly reformed Polish state claimed large portions of majority ethnic Lithuanian regions. During the Russian Empire, the differences were much less stark. A general trend had emerged where larger, urbanized areas retained a Polish identity, while the surrounding rural areas were decidedly Lithuanian. It's difficult to form nation states based on ethnic identity without excluding those who feel a different nationalist urge and including those who don't feel Lithuanian at all. Nowhere was this more clear than the area of the former Suwałk gubernia, which was split between Poland and Lithuania, and where today you still find large populations of ethnic Poles in Lithuania and ethnic Lithuanians in modern Poland. This also explains why many records from the former Suwałk gubernia are not found in Lithuania, but in the Polish National Archives. In the interwar period, borders continued to shift as wars were fought against the Soviet Union and Poland. Here's our view of the Republic of Lithuania in the period 1920 to 1940. The areas in shades of green represent the bounds of the Lithuanian Republic, while the areas in gray show territories ceded and sometimes contested with Poland, who also regained independence following World War I. The gubernias and districts of the Russian period were replaced by the apskritis, essentially counties. This was the geopolitical arrangement until the start of World War II, when Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union invaded the area. Like so many parts of Eastern Europe, Lithuania was devastated during World War II. Estimates vary, but as many as 1 million Lithuanians, nearly a third of its pre-war population, were killed or displaced during the war and its immediate aftermath. In order to research effectively in European sources, you need to know exactly where your ancestor was from. Records are arranged by town, village, or parish. Without an exact place of origin, how will you know which civil registration district or religious congregation holds records for your ancestors? Unfortunately, having just a gubernia or district or apskritis is not enough. You need the city, town, or village. Lithuanian genealogy, for the most part, lacks a centralized database of church and civil records. Very little has been indexed, and effective research will require examining the original records. I say for the most part because there's a group focused on Jewish Lithuanian families that has transcribed many Jewish records in Lithuania, but I'll talk more about them later. I always caution that before you can research in Europe, you need to exhaust all American sources first for a Lithuanian ancestor's place of origin. This may sound simple, but given language barriers as well as the way that Lithuanian place names changed officially from Polish to Russian to Lithuanian, you very well might end up with a series of seemingly related place names, but still unable to drop a pin on its modern equivalent in Lithuania. Then, of course, there are transcription and recording errors. Many of the American sources that capture vital information on our ancestors were recorded by people unfamiliar with Lithuanian geography. Many of our ancestors were illiterate and could only offer phonetic variations of their birthplace. This slide lists some of the most common American sources that may include specific birthplace information for an immigrant ancestor. The general rule of thumb here is to collect as many records as possible with all variations of a reported birthplace and see if any are identifiable as a modern Lithuanian town, village, or city, or if the place name is reflective of the Russian name from the 19th or early 20th centuries. I'll very quickly point out a few of the best sources for birthplace information. Special shout out here to American church records as a rich source of information for an ancestor's origins. This is an example of a 1916 marriage record between two Lithuanian members of a Roman Catholic church in Massachusetts. The record is written in Latin, but includes the native parishes of the bride and groom written in their Polish forms. Church records are often the best, most accurate source of place names in Lithuania because many of our Lithuanian immigrant ancestors joined religious communities with other Lithuanians, and a Lithuanian ethnic parish was likely to host a Lithuanian-speaking priest, someone more familiar with their parishioners' language and the geography of where they originated. Here's an example of part of a naturalization record filed in the U.S. District Court for Chicago. The applicant, Joseph Avinsky, includes information on his address, nationality, birth date, and birthplace recorded here as Varnius, Lithuania. Joseph's wife, Mary, was born in the town of Pagramantis, Lithuania. The section just above the photograph records the date and place of arrival in the United States. Using this information, we can find a passenger list, which will also include an immigrant's birthplace and, depending on the year, their last residence in Lithuania. Keep in mind that even these very important citizenship documents can be riddled with inconsistencies. Here's an example of the first page of a passenger manifest from 1922. Everyone on this page is identified as Lithuanian. If we follow the red arrow to number 10 on the manifest, we find the passenger Mariona Zametskaita, a 20-year-old single woman. The manifest includes her last foreign residence and the contact information for a relative or friend in her country of origin. Mariona listed her brother Casimir of Lilavini in Tauregi Apskritis. Passenger records will reflect the political reality of the time. Here, Mariona's information is recorded with Lithuanian forms of her name, surname, and place of origin. If we found a passenger record from the late 19th century or pre-World War I, we'd expect the immigrant's name and birthplace to be recorded in its Russian equivalent. Here's an example of an obituary found in a Lithuanian American newspaper. They're very often this rich in detail, including the exact birthplace of the deceased, how long they'd lived in the United States, and the names of their surviving family members in the United States and often back in Lithuania too. When the funeral is described, that will also point you towards the church that might hold additional records for your family. You can expect the Lithuanian form of your ancestor's name in these newspapers. It should be noted, too, that many Lithuanian immigrants had obituaries published in English language newspapers as well, and those sometimes do include the place in Lithuania where they were born. In my experience, what makes Lithuanian research difficult is the wild variety of naming conventions, both place names and personal names. A Lithuanian immigrant may have chosen to use the Russian form of their surname, perhaps to match the name they immigrated under. Even long after the demise of the Russian Empire, many Lithuanian American families retained their Russified surnames, choosing to stick to the surname as it appeared in their immigration records and earliest records in the United States. The phonetic differences between Russian and Lithuanian can lead to a surname looking very different when the two forms are compared. For example, let's take the different iterations of the Lithuanian surname Klemarauskas. These records are all pertaining to Aleksandras Klemarauskas and stretch from his marriage in Lithuania in 1891 to his obituary 40 years later. The marriage record is written in Russian, reflecting the official use of Russian in Lithuania at the time. In 1892, he immigrated to the United States under a phonetic version of his Russian name, Klemarovsky. The example from 1911 comes from the baptismal record of his son at a Lithuanian Roman Catholic church in Massachusetts. Here the name is represented in its correct Lithuanian form. The 1930 census has the name starting with a C instead of a K, and his obituary opts for a Polish-like spelling that includes an N before the suffix, Klemaransky. When faced with so many variations on a name, it can be difficult to know what you'll actually be searching for when you get to Lithuanian records. And what you'll be searching for is likely to change depending on the language of the record keeping. On the right-hand portion of the slide is an excerpt from a dictionary of Lithuanian surnames. You can search by the beginning of a surname, as I did here, to try to find the best fit from a list of modern Lithuanian surnames. Each surname entry includes information on related forms of the surname and its geographic distribution in modern Lithuania. There are also some grammatical conventions to be on the lookout for, because Lithuanian surnames change depending on the noun case and the person that they describe. Lithuanian women have different versions of their surname based on whether they're married or unmarried. The Lithuanian noun cases are most important when researching Lithuanian records after World War I, when record keeping switched to the Lithuanian language. If your Lithuanian ancestor immigrated to North America after World War I, their passenger and naturalization records might also be under the correct Lithuanian form of the name. You can see from the two surname examples at the bottom of the slide how a surname can transform depending on who's using it. Russian and Polish, as Slavic languages, also use masculine and feminine surname suffixes, identifying the differences between surname endings like ski and ska, or ov for a man and ova for a woman, will be helpful for 19th century Lithuanian records that are written in Polish or Russian. On the subject of Lithuanian surnames, you'll find that many are rooted in place names, perhaps providing a clue to where the first ancestor to assume the surname lived. Many surnames are derived from the first name of an early ancestor. For example, the surname Butkus, included on the slide, is derived from the given name Butkintas. When we turn to researching in Lithuanian or European sources, what types of records are we talking about? Where are we likely to find records that help us trace deeper into our ancestry? While the range of military or land or tax records might exist for our ancestors, when we first begin our search in Lithuanian sources, we'll mostly be focusing on surviving vital and church records. Depending on the religion, many church records extend back centuries. By the mid-19th century, record keeping across all religions was mandated within the Russian Empire, making religious records the most complete collection of vital information on your Lithuanian ancestors. In 1940, a new system of civil registration was put in place with all births, marriages, and deaths treated as governmental, not religious records. Civil records were maintained at civil registration offices. In the 19th century, the Russian Empire maintained a series of tax and conscription lists called revision lists that were updated periodically with information for levying a poll tax, as well as tracking men eligible for compulsory military service in the Imperial Army. Local censuses were sometimes performed, but they vary wildly in coverage and preservation. In the winter of 1897, Russia conducted an empire-wide census that included family groupings. There were two sets of the census returns. One stayed in the district office, while the other was forwarded to St. Petersburg, where the demographic and statistical information was gathered, and then the original returns destroyed. Very few of the local copies of the census return survive. So for the most part, we're really talking about religious records as your starting point for research in Lithuania. Religious records, meaning records of births or baptisms, marriages, and deaths or burials, were recorded and grouped by specific religious congregation. This pie chart illustrates the religious breakdown of Lithuania at the time of its first independent census in 1923. Then, as today, Lithuania was overwhelmingly Roman Catholic. I would guess, too, that a majority of the webinar audience today had Lithuanian ancestors who were Roman Catholic. Roman Catholic records in Lithuania often stretch back centuries, but transcripts were not required for official record keeping until 1826. The next largest group were those who practiced Judaism, representing nearly a tenth of Lithuania's population in 1923. Record keeping for Jewish communities was mandated within the Lithuanian territories of the Russian Empire starting in 1835. Depending on the region, some earlier Jewish vital records were collected in the records of Roman Catholic churches. Smaller percentages of Greek Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant denominations were also active within Lithuania. During the communist period in the mid-20th century, all religious records were ordered to be transferred to the National Archive system. The result is that the main historical archive in Vilnius holds a tremendous number of religious records from across Lithuania. However, religious records from areas that were contested between Poland, Belarus, or Russia may have ended up in a different country's archive system or are still held by a modern religious authority. When we talk about Roman Catholic records, we're fortunate to have two separate record sets to mine for information. Each parish was responsible for maintaining birth or baptismal records, marriage records, and death or burial records. At the end of each year, a copy of that year's records was made. One set of records remained with the parish, and the other was forwarded to the appropriate deanery, which is an ecclesiastical authority responsible for all the parishes within a geographic area. In many cases, copies of both record sets have survived. If a parish book was destroyed or hasn't yet been digitized, it may be possible to examine the deanery copies to fill in the gap. The deanery copies include all parishes in their jurisdiction in a given year. This can be helpful as our ancestors might have married someone outside their home parish, but still close enough to have been captured in another parish in their deanery. Deanery copies from the 1860s until World War I often have an index at the end of each year, which also greatly simplifies and speeds up our research. The parish copy of records may include additional record types like confirmation lists or lists of all the family groupings in the parish. With all that in mind, there are a number of factors that can complicate our research, and quickly. Do I know what parish or religious community my ancestor was a part of? Where are the records now? Have they been transferred to a centralized archive? Do any of them survive? Are the records digitized? Can I research from home, or do I need to hire someone to research the records for me? And even if they are available, can I understand them? Especially if the records are written not just in a different language, but in a different alphabet than I'm used to. So first we need to find the parish responsible for the town or village where our ancestor lived. To do that, we'll follow a few steps. Step 1. Drop a pin on your ancestral town or village. If your ancestor came from an area with a small population, they would likely have gone to a nearby larger town for religious services, and their birth, marriage, or death record will be within the records from that nearby larger town. In other words, we need to know the name of that larger town in order to find the right collection of records. We should consider using a gazetteer, essentially a dictionary of places specific to a certain time period. Lietuvos Zemėlapis is based on data from a 1939 map of Lithuania. Richard Gustautas has compiled all Lithuanian place names into a database that includes alternate forms of the town name and its location in Lithuania. Pay very careful attention to the How to Use the Gazetteer section on the homepage, as navigating the map can be challenging at first. A useful resource for Jewish and non-Jewish ancestry alike, the Jewish Gen Communities database consolidates all the official and linguistic variations of a place name and describes the administrative structure from the 19th and 20th centuries. Searching the Polish, Yiddish, Russian, or Lithuanian form of a town name should yield the same results. Here I've searched for the town name Vornie, found on an American record for a Lithuanian immigrant. And here's the list of our results. If we pay attention to the first result for the town of Varnai, Lithuania, you'll see that there are 11 alternate names shown, with several that approximate Vornie. This is an excellent candidate for the town described on the American record. Context clues like knowledge that an immigrant's spouse was from the same district can help solidify that you've found the correct town. Here's a closer look at Varnai in the communities database. If your ancestors were Jewish, each community entry will also include links to genealogical resources and the names of nearby Jewish communities. The database includes administrative divisions from prior to World War I, the interwar period, and following World War II. Importantly, each community page also includes where the town or village is found on a modern map of Lithuania. If you're still having trouble finding where a town is located, try searching the town name in the Lithuanian version of the website Wikipedia. Lithuanian towns and villages are covered in far greater detail on the Lithuanian version of Wikipedia than its English equivalent. If you can't read Lithuanian, there are ways to translate the web page into English. So my tip is to use an online translator. Some web browsers include a plugin application that will automatically translate websites in languages other than English. There are also a number of translation websites that can also do that job. I most often use Google Translate. You can copy and paste the URL of the website that you'd like translated and the translator will produce a new link you can follow to the translated web page. Nothing's perfect, however. There are some words that don't translate well, like the town name, here translated from Varnai to Crows. More importantly, the translator usually does well enough that you can read about the history of the town, a breakdown of administrative divisions, sometimes from across various time periods. In this case, the article includes a reference to Varnai's 2 Roman Catholic churches. By selecting either church name, you'll be brought to another Wikipedia article, and Google Translate will continue to translate that page and any others that you navigate to. On to step 2. Locate the nearest church or religious community to your ancestral town or village. For family historians with Lithuanian ancestors who were Roman Catholic, this website, in English called the Digital Church Map, allows you to visualize the church's hierarchy, the administrative layers between an ancestor's church, deanery, and archdiocese, as well as determining which churches were nearest to an ancestor's town or village of origin, and the map is interactive. For example, let's say that your ancestor was from the village of Bardashiske, circled in red on the slide. The village is roughly midway between the parish churches in Kaltenenai to the northeast and Tubenis to the southwest. It's reasonable to conclude that records for our ancestors from Bardashiske may be found in either parish, even if the town was formerly part of one parish or the other. It's important to check nearby parishes as well. People tend to marry people from their parish or neighboring parishes. This again underscores the value of the deanery copies of church records, as Tubenis and Kaltenenai can be searched for the same record set from a given year. By searching each parish church on the Lithuanian version of Wikipedia, you may find a list of villages that were historically part of the parish. But the digital church map goes a step further. By navigating to the 3rd tab from the homepage, you'll be brought to another interactive map that includes information for Roman Catholic records held in archives in Lithuania. This map shows all the Roman Catholic parishes for which there are records digitized online. The churches shown in gray either do not have digitized materials available online yet, or depending on the location, their records might be held outside of Lithuanian archives, perhaps in Poland or Belarus. Keep in mind, too, that this map tool tracks digital collections from Lithuanian repositories. Some specialized genealogical groups have photographed church records and made them available outside of the main digital portals tracked using this map. If your parish church of interest is gray on this map, you may need to hire someone to access the records, or you may need to keep scouring Lithuanian genealogical websites to see if anyone has photographed the records on their own. By selecting one of the red churches, in this case the new church, one of the 2 parishes in Varnai, a small window will appear with the name of the church and the year it was constructed. The church name is very important. The way that the town name appears grammatically in the church's title, here it's Varniu instead of Varnai, is the form of the name that you'll use later to search digital collections from the Lithuanian archives. Without the proper, this is called the genitive noun case, you'll not obtain the results that you're looking for. By navigating to the related tables section, you can select the gray arrow beside the word Saltinai. Digitized materials for the parish will be listed here. LVIA, in this example, is the acronym for the Lithuanian State Historical Archives in Vilnius. As you navigate record collections, you'll become familiar with the Lithuanian words for birth, marriage, and death. If we see a collection that we'd like to browse, we again select the gray arrow. Here's the catalog information for the dataset that we selected. Each collection in the Lithuanian State Archives is given a fond number, a series number, and the file number. By going to the e-reading room of the archives and inputting this catalog information, which we'll look at in just a few minutes, you can access the scanned record collection. Step 3, finding digitized records. The vast majority of Roman Catholic records from Lithuania are stored in the Lithuanian State Historical Archives which is headquartered in Vilnius. The archives does have a research and copy service available. They're best equipped to determine if your church or parish of interest is covered in their collections. In recent years, LVIA has pushed to digitize many of their Roman Catholic records, debuting a new version of their digital portal called e-Paveldas. While we're focusing on religious records now, the Lithuanian State Historical Archives is also the primary repository for revision lists, some civil registration records, and a range of other archival sources. As I mentioned before, not all records are found in Lithuanian archives, nor are all digitized records available just through LVIA. FamilySearch.org has a large number of religious records digitized through their online catalog. Metricae and Genmetrica are two Lithuanian sites with user-submitted indexes and images from church books. Wikimedia Commons is another that has a robust collection of Lithuanian church records. Geneteka is a Polish website with indexes and scans of church books from areas of Lithuania with large Polish populations, especially the areas of the former Suwałk gubernia and major cities like Kaunas and Vilnius. The Polish National Archives catalog is worth searching for any digitized material from parishes near the Polish border. The National Historical Archive of Belarus does not have a digital portal for church records, but it does accept record requests. Focusing back on the collections in the Lithuanian State Historical Archives and their digital portal at e-Paveldas. At present, there are more than 100 Roman Catholic churches whose records have been added to the portal, covering thousands of individual church books. Both parish and deanery copies of records can be found in their portal. Be sure to use the genitive noun case identified from the digital church map site to look for digitized church records at e-Paveldas. e-Paveldas is not just a portal for church records. A researcher can also find photographic collections in their holdings, which may be helpful in contextualizing the places where your ancestors originated. Here's the main search page for e-Paveldas. Thankfully, the website is available in English as well as Lithuanian. Here's a sample page of results where I searched the parish of Pašilė using the genitive noun case and the acronym RKB, which translated from Lithuanian means Roman Catholic Church, which is used in LVIA's holdings in the titles of many of their church records. These church books from Pašilė are the parish copy. We know this because they're not grouped with other parishes or divided by record year. And earlier I mentioned that aside from e-Paveldas, the Lithuanian State Historical Archives has an e-reading room, which is translated into English, the Electronic Archive Information System, which is used to access digitized materials from their microfilm collections. Using the information we found in the digital church map for the new church at Varnai, we can enter the fond, series, and file number into their advanced search form. Among the results is the church book that was identified from the digital church map results. We can see that records from our target church are part of a larger collection of records from the Diocese of Telšiai. Within this collection, we'll find birth records from Varnai, as well as neighboring parishes between 1794 and 1795. The Electronic Archive Information System also includes an interactive map feature covering its digitized materials. By zooming in on Varnai once again, our two churches in town are identified. The results on the right-hand side of the page list all of the digitized materials available in the e-reading room that cover churches or parishes within the selected area of the map. If you're having trouble identifying what church records are available online, I highly recommend using the website Lithuanian Roman Catholic Ancestor Search.com, which was developed by Robert Normand. When I began working on Lithuanian research cases, this website was invaluable for navigating the State Historical Archives website and their collections. He provides step-by-step instructions for locating records, as well as tips for interpreting and translating them. Which brings us to step 4. researching and deciphering the records that we find. The good news is that birth, marriage, and death records were largely recorded on standardized forms. What looks like a big block of text can be weeded through for the most important details for us as genealogists. The parish copy of a Roman Catholic record will most often have the surname of the person described in the record on the margin of the page. This can make perusing each year's records a little bit simpler. As I've mentioned previously, these records can appear in a range of different languages. The trickiest for native English speakers is, of course, Russian, which is written using the Cyrillic alphabet. Jewish records from the late 19th century are often split, with one page written in Russian and the other in Yiddish using the Hebrew alphabet. These records are very formulaic. Learn the formula where the names, dates, and town names are found, and you can research effectively without having to become fluent in a range of European languages. For help learning the formula, consider looking at articles on Lithuanian genealogy that are found on the FamilySearch.org research wiki. The article on Lithuanian church records includes breakdowns of the major types of records and also translations from Russian of the common headings found on vital record forms. If you're feeling particularly ambitious, you can study the Russian alphabet in order to read the cursive Cyrillic common to 19th century Lithuanian records. This chart from Wikipedia is particularly useful for translating Russian words into their component sounds and helpful in determining if a Russian surname is phonetically similar to the Lithuanian surname that you're researching. The Family Search Research Wiki also has helpful genealogical word lists for Lithuanian, Polish, Russian, and Latin. Here's an example of a birth record from 1878 that I abstracted for genealogical information. The surname is recorded in the margin on the left. This record is written in Russian and reflects the period when the Russian Empire controlled Lithuania. The surname is rendered using Russian phonetics as Pardavkov. The surname used by this family at home and perhaps after they immigrated may have been different. Pardavkov is phonetically similar to the Lithuanian surname Partaukas. The date of birth and baptism follow. Then 3 paragraphs of description. The first notes the date that the child was baptized, the name of the priest, and the name of the child. Next is the parents' information, including their social status, residence, and date of their child's birth. The final column names the child's godparents. On marriage records, you'll also find the names of the parents of the bride and groom and witnesses. Burial records will sometimes name the deceased surviving spouse and children. There is no unified database of Lithuanian vital records, but efforts within the Jewish genealogical community have simplified access to records abroad. Volunteer indexing efforts at jewishgen.org and the Lithuanian Jewish Special Interest Group, also known as Litvak-SIG, pictured here, have made it possible to search across a large area for an ancestor's origins. Litvak-SIG's scope goes beyond just vital records. Their database also includes information indexed from census records, revision lists, and passport records, among others. The Miriam Weiner Roots to Roots Foundation has a database of archival resources for Jewish communities across Europe. If we had a Jewish ancestor from Vernai, we can see that there are a number of collections that may be useful in our search. Each entry notes the repository where the records are held and their catalog numbers. In the remaining time that we have, I'll quickly go over some places where you can seek help if you get stuck with your Lithuanian research. For help locating resources in Lithuania, consider joining a Facebook or other social media group geared towards Lithuanian genealogy. Researchers and family historians of all experience levels can crowdsource answers to their genealogical questions. These groups are also excellent for sourcing recommendations for genealogists for hire with access to Lithuanian archives. The Genealogical Translations group on Facebook is an excellent resource for translating difficult-to-read records. Be sure to follow the posting guidelines requested by any group that you join. The Association of Professional Genealogists maintains a directory of their members that can be filtered by research specialty and country of residence. Association members adhere to a code of ethics and professional practices, which is reassuring when we consider hiring someone thousands of miles away who may request a deposit on their services. Let's review. Lithuania's complicated history of boundary and linguistic changes have a profound impact on our genealogical research. While records are sometimes scattered, Roman Catholic records from Lithuania are continually being digitized and placed online. Those with Jewish Lithuanian ancestors can rely on groups like Litvak Sig to navigate a range of Jewish-specific records in Lithuanian archives. With persistence, you can learn to extract 19th century records written in Russian, but also don't be afraid to ask for help because this research can be complicated.
Great. Thank you so much, James, for that excellent presentation. So much great information shared there. We have had some questions coming in, and you can feel free to keep asking questions in that Q&A panel found at the bottom of your screen. We will get to as many of those questions as we can in just a moment here. First, I quickly just want to share some upcoming events that we have. So first of all, I want to highlight our upcoming heritage tour in May, the Jewels of the Baltics, Lithuania, and Latvia. This will be a fantastic tour where participants will explore the history of Lithuania and Latvia and visit key historic sites. There's also an option where you can add on a visit to Estonia if you're interested as well. So that should be a great trip, and you can view the full itinerary on our website at americanancestors.org/heritage-tours. And then I quickly just want to mention some online events coming up. So on January 25th, we have a webinar where our genealogist Kyle Hurst will be giving a presentation on how to write a register style sketch. This should be helpful if you're interested in writing your family history. Then on the 27th, we have our virtual preservation roadshow. This is a really fun event that allows you to get access in advance to lectures prepared by our archivist and our conservator on preserving your family documents. And then there's a live session where you can submit items that you'd like to receive personalized preservation advice on. So highly recommend checking that one out. And then finally, on February 6th, we have a very interesting American Inspiration author event with author Lisa Belkin, and she'll be discussing her book, Genealogy of a Murder, 4 Generations, 3 Families, 1 Fateful Night. And that will be moderated by our genealogist, Melanie McComb. You can learn more about all of these events at americanancestors.org/events. All right, so now let's get to your questions that have been coming in here. So first, James, we had a question. I know you had shown some Catholic church records in this presentation, and we have someone who's wondering if Lutheran churches would have maintained similar records.
Yes, they did. Like all of the rest of the denominations, the Russian Empire mandated that they keep records as a vital record as well as a church record, beginning in the 1820s, 30s. That doesn't mean that the Lutheran church that your ancestor went to doesn't have parish books that extend much earlier than that, going back into the 17th century. What I didn't mention in the history kind of portion of this is that areas that were kind of on the Baltic had a lot of influence from East Prussia. And so there are a lot of Lutherans that were settled particularly in those areas. Those records would also be in the custody of the LVIA, or depending on their proximity to Poland, they may have been wrapped up in there. Some records too, after World War II, that related to areas of Prussia ended up back in Germany as well. So that's a great example of how these records can end up scattered in a bunch of different places, depending on the religious persuasion of the people that they're recording and where exactly they were in Lithuania.
All right, Great, thank you so much, James. Next here, we have someone who says that they found US death certificates that only say born in Lithuania, and not the specific town. And this person isn't sure what church that they attended in the US. So what recommendations would you have for somebody in that situation?
I generally recommend trying to find as many American records as possible because you'll be generally lost if you just try to turn to researching in Lithuania. You really need to have that place name. And it is very frustrating when you're researching in American records and the census just says Lithuania or even naturalization records, early ones, won't have more specific information than just Lithuania. If you're really striking out after taking a look at all those different kinds of records that I stuck on one of the slides earlier in the presentation, then you need to start expanding. We call it fan research. It's looking at the friends, associates, and neighbors of your ancestor. And the idea being that your ancestor probably surrounded him or herself with other people who shared the same place of origin. They formed communities here with people they were familiar with back in the old country. And so if you start branching out, examining those people, maybe they do have records that have more specific information than just Lithuania. And if a bunch of them seem to all be coming from the same place, then you can kind of infer that your ancestor may be from there as well.
Great, thank you very much. We also have a question here from someone who's wondering how different is research for ethnic Germans in Lithuania? I have a great grandfather whose birth record is recorded in German. How does that relate to your guidance about borders, language, and record keeping?
The kind of tools that I was talking about that help with any of these record sets that are in a different language, you can go on the Family Search Research Wiki and pull up a German genealogical word list. You'll want to become familiar with current, which is the form, kind of stylized form of cursive that you probably find on those church records. But the research can still be done as long as you can identify who holds the record and you get access to the images. You can work through them the same way that you would a Russian or a Lithuanian language record.
All right, thank you very much. So then, James, I also wanted to ask, I know this webinar is focused on getting back to the old country, but we do have someone in the Q&A, Justina, who is sending us greetings from Lithuania. So welcome, Justina. Glad to have you here with us today.
Justina, I
And
apologize for anything that I mispronounced.
and it does sound like Justina is looking for relatives in the USA who came from Lithuania.
Mhm.
So and we might have other people tuning in from Lithuania today. Do you have any kind of recommendations or special considerations for people who might be trying to trace ancestors who immigrated to the US from Lithuania and kind of going back that way?
Yeah, kind of reverse engineering it. Um,
Mhm.
you're going to be looking primarily at immigration records first, trying to find somebody who is captured in a passenger list in a port in North America that matches the place of origin that you have for the relative in Lithuania. And then from there, you can start branching out into vital records and searching in newspapers. One thing that I will mention that could be helpful to a lot of people who are on the Zoom call today is that we did do a webinar somewhat recently on using American sources to do Lithuanian research. And I believe, Kathleen, you can correct me that that's available in the watch section of the American Ancestors website. And so the kind of resources that I talk about in that lecture could certainly be used to reverse engineer and track someone who had left Lithuania that you're trying to find in the United States.
Great. Thank you so much, James. Um, So then let's see here. We also have a question from someone who is looking for American Lithuanian church records. This person specifically looking in Haverhill, Massachusetts, but the church there has closed. And I'm sure a
Mhm.
lot of other people are probably in that same boat. So what do you recommend in that situation where a church has closed?
Sure. Usually, when the church is closed, there was another parish that kind of absorbed the responsibility for the administrative parts of that former parish. So, all that a long way of saying that it's possible that the church books from a closed church ended up with whatever the successor church was that absorbed the parishioners from that area. Oftentimes, when a parish closed, if the diocese or the archdiocese has its own archive, um, those church books, instead of being bumped over to another church, end up centralized with the archdiocese. So, for your specific example, Haverhill is part of the Archdiocese of Boston, and the Archdiocese has a large archive off of 93 in Braintree, Massachusetts, and you can go and ask to see the church books from a church that was in Haverhill. They required their parishes to transfer church books, so that's where you would go for that Haverhill example. But generally, the rule of thumb is either check with whatever church nearby probably absorbed the other church when it was closed, or contact some authority from the diocese or the archdiocese and ask them whether they know where the records are stored. It's way more advantageous for the record to have been centralized in an archive because they'll have policies for access and are generally designed to allow people to research. When it comes to a church book that's still sitting at the church where it was recorded, you're really dealing with parish administrators, and some churches are better than others when it comes to granting access to records. So hopefully, for your sake, with the Haverhill Church, those records are sitting in Braintree, and you'll have no problem accessing them. We also have digitized many of the Archdiocese of Boston's records up to about 1920 on our website. So you could consider looking there to see if we've already digitized it, and then you've saved yourself a trip to the Archdiocese.
All right, great. Thank you so much, James, for this great presentation today and for your answers to these questions. Unfortunately, that is all that we have time for today. But if you do have more specific questions about your family history research, or if we weren't able to get to your question today, you might consider hiring our research services team or using our expanded chat service. I highly recommend checking out this chat service. It puts you in direct communication with a genealogist, and it's completely free and open to the public. The hours for that chat service are Monday through Saturday from 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And to access that service, you can just go to americanancestors.org/chat, or it will also appear in the corner of our database search page. So thank you again for joining us today. As you leave this event, you will have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of our members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors to help keep these programs free and to create more free programs for you and others. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. Best of luck in your research, and I hope to see you all at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.